Hi everybody, my name is Geraldine and I am here today to talk to you about why I believe man did not make it to the moon. And I have three reasons which we will be discussing. The first one is the Van Allen belts. The second one we are going to be talking about satellites relative to the Van Allen belts. And then we are going to be talking about the temperature on the moon. And finally, we are going to be talking about this man, whose name and face you probably recognize as being Neil Armstrong. But first I'm going to be talking about the Van Allen belts. And what are they? They were founded by James Van Allen in 1958. And really what they are is a vast, huge field, two of them, belts of radiation that completely envelop what we know as Earth. He discovered them in 1958, James Van Allen, and subsequently they are now called after him. So as you can see here, you have the Earth, you have an inner belt and an outer belt. I'm now going to be talking to you about satellites relative to the importance of these belts. From where I am standing, we have what we call low Earth orbiting satellites. So this is the Earth here, as you can see, and you have what's known as LEOs, low Earth orbiting satellites. What am I talking about? I'm talking about the International Space Station, the BSky B satellite, the Hubble Space Telescope is at this, and every military spy satellite is at this particular orbit. What is that orbit? That orbit is 300 kilometers from where I'm standing if I was to go right up. Now, we need to know that the beginning of the Van Allen belt is 1,000 kilometers from where I'm standing. So as you can see then, what I'm trying to tell you is from the LEOs to the beginning of the inner belt of the Van Allen, there's a 700 to 750 kilometer wide safe zone or neutral zone where the radiation won't go near or interfere with the 2,500 satellites that are in orbit, which cost tens of trillions of dollars, and that's very worth noting. Now we also have what we know as medium Earth orbiting satellites. So what have we got here that you know? GPS, for example, Global Positioning System. The American military satellite GPS, as it is now known, and they opened it up to the entire world to use. Now Russia and Europe and China are putting their own global positioning systems up. They don't trust the American one anymore for some reason or another. And then you have the outer satellites here on the very edge, at the end of the belts, well away from them, which are American NASA observatory satellites. And there are not that many of them, and these are actually stationary at this junction. So this is just an image which I think is very nice, and it's of a satellite above what we call the Earth at 300 kilometers roughly above the Earth, and it shows a wonderful curvature of the Earth, and it'll give you the weather, plus the continents are very clear and visible. Now we have a very good image here which was produced by NASA, in fact, in 2012, where they sent a probe up into the Van Allen belts, and here's an image of the two probes. So as you can see the Earth here, you can see the inner satellite or satellites here, or the LEOs, and then you see the inner belts, and then you have this large red area which is the outer belts, and it indicates that you have the NASA Solar Dynamic Observatory satellite positioned at roughly around 25,000 miles above the Earth, which is at the end of the outer belt. So the main message here I'm trying to tell you about satellites is they have to be kept a couple of thousand kilometers away from these belts. Interesting to note that they did discover a third smaller belt in between these two. So that's in 2012. This is just a NASA executive announcing the launch of what was known as the Radiation Belt Storm Probe, or the Van Allen belt probes, in 2012, just for your own information. Now I'm going to be speaking to you about the moon and the temperature on the moon, and why these men could never have gone there before that very reason about the temperature, because the moon has what they call a 27.5 day cycle, or 13.5 days facing the sun on one side, and the moon is on the, that never changes. You have the light side and the dark side. But on the light side, where they actually purportedly landed, just remember that the temperature there was plus 250 degrees, 258 if we are very scientific about it, degrees Fahrenheit, and on the dark side it's minus 258 degrees Fahrenheit minus. And it is contended that they went up to the moon in this particular suit, which is a photograph from the Smithsonian Museum in Washington, and that they had an adequate cooling system. Actually, their shoes and this whole thing would have melted, and they had an inadequate cooling system. That's there for all to see. This is an interesting fact for you all to know, because this is a rocket that was supposed to be launched in 2006 by NASA, and it was fraught with difficulties just launching it. There were 3-4 attempts made, and this is an actual photograph of it finally taking off in the year of 2009. And what it was called was an LRO, a lunar robot in orbit. And the thing really was, it was carrying 6 payloads. But the first 2 payloads are really, really interesting, because the first one was called, in fact, Crater, and the second one was called Lunar. And the first one, in fact, measured temperature, and the second one was radiation. So the moon also has an enormous amount of radiation. Now, my argument here is that if you send all of those men that had families and extended families off to the moon 45 years ago, you surely should know all of this, and you shouldn't be really in the 21st century trying to figure it out at this junction. It would sound quite crazy. But now we have this man here, who I think you'll all recognise immediately, Neil Armstrong, and he has his mouth firmly shut in this particular picture. I selected this of him because from the moment he arrived back, he actually kept his mouth shut. He refused to speak to any of us, or tell us what it was all like. And in fact, in this particular piece of YouTube footage, which you have total access to on the internet, you will in fact see that he's asked a question by Sir Patrick Moore: did you see stars? Very simple question. And he said he couldn't actually remember. And then to add insult to injury, Aldrin, who was sitting at his elbow, and they are visibly seen nudging each other, said no, he couldn't. They couldn't remember. They had no knowledge. Well, the answer to that, according to all astronomers, is yes, they would have seen the amount of stars that we see in the heavens in the Milky Way, our galaxy. Their stars, when they were on the moon, wouldn't have been twinkling, because they didn't, the Van Allen belts creates an atmosphere to all intents and purposes. So that's why our stars twinkle. Theirs wouldn't have been twinkling if they were on the moon. They would have been just like lights. So that's the answer to that. So, but they have no memory. But I know somebody that actually has, and he's been there, and he came back dancing, and he did a wonderful dance called the Moonwalk. And as I bet you guess who it is. His name is Michael Jackson. So there you are, ladies and gentlemen. That's my presentation for, and I contend they never were there, but Michael was. Thank you.